Welcome to the Newsmakers podcast. I'm Billy Hollowell, and this is a show where we go behind the headlines every day to bring you an interview with a pastor, entertainer, politician, or other notable news figure. And this is a show, again, it's daily, but it's based on our weekly TV show, which is also called Newsmakers. You can watch it on the CBN News channel and also on our YouTube page. And on this show, every day, we dive deep. It's a little more longer form with one of the people who you will often see on our Newsmakers show or across the CBN News platforms. On today's Newsmakers, we're talking all about the film Bonhoeffer, Pastor, Spy, Assassin. We're joined by Emmanuel and Camille Kampouris. They are producers of the film, and they are here to share the backstory. With no further ado, here are Emmanuel and Camille. Well, there is a lot to talk about today, the new film Bonhoeffer. Emmanuel, I'm going to start with you. What drove you to want to be involved in this project?
Well, I have to tell you, about in 2010, I read a biography on Bonhoeffer by Eric Metaxas. In fact, I had never heard of Bonhoeffer then until I read the book. And in fact, it was a long biography, but yet it read very well. But it was just like a novel, actually. I couldn't put it down. And it really was very inspirational. And it said, well, you know, why don't more people should know about this? So we decided to invest in a script and see if we can, you know, with our friend and say, let's give it out there and see if a filmmaker would take it. So we started on that journey. And I don't know, you can continue the story there, but
well, yeah, I mean, famous last words. We never intended to do a film. You know, we just said after a couple of years, maybe. So we read the book in 2010, and maybe 2011 or 12, we thought, you know, someone should do a movie about it, but never, you know, no one seemed interested.
No one did.
So I have a background in performing arts, and I said, you know what? It all starts with a script. Let's get a script. But I worked in television, and so you know, you pop out scripts every week, right? It's not. I thought it would be maybe a year process, and it turned out to be 7 years just to get a script.
Yeah.
So
it took a long time. We went through 3 screenwriters, 2 script doctors, as they call them. And 3 directors, and we finally got an acceptable script after these 7 years. So it was quite a journey, and became a calling afterward, because we couldn't give it up. We thought we should proceed with this.
You know, it's so interesting to me that it was so difficult, and this is always the story, to get it moving, because the story is so compelling, right? You mentioned I didn't know a lot about him before that book either, and yet here you have this crazy story in the middle of one of history's most wild times, with a man who has incredible faith and is dealing with a very crazy situation, right? And so when you look at this film, now that it's done, and now that it's going to be out, people can see this and they can watch it. I'll start with you, Emmanuel. What is your hope for this movie?
Well, I mean, our hope is that it will essentially, bottom line is that it will raise up men and women, young and old, like Bonhoeffer, show, no fear, and to speak the truth, essentially, and speak the truth to power, not being afraid. We have this cancel culture and everything else. Everybody's afraid to speak. But, if you take Bonhoeffer, will inspire you to say, look, stand your ground, speak the truth, and do not be afraid. I mean, that's essentially the message, in my opinion. That's what we hope it will inspire, whether you're young or you're old or middle-aged, whatever, that you'll do that. That's my first answer to your question.
That's amazing. And Camille, what about for you? What would you say? I'm sure you echo all of that, but would you add anything to that in terms of your hope for the impact?
Yeah, I mean, I totally echo all that, but but for us also, it was that Bonhoeffer first took on his church. They were not doing anything to help the Jews. They were more interested in power and influence and getting along with this new crazy leader, Hitler. And so I think for us also, it's a call to the church to go back to God in a real way, like Bonhoeffer. It's a great movie in one sense, because it indicts a failed church, right? A church that failed courageous morally, it had no courage. But it shows what a real Christian should be like in the life of Bonhoeffer. And if you're not a person of faith, and we are, but if you're not, we hope this movie will really start people on that journey.
Well, it's very interesting, because some of the statements that Bonhoeffer made that attributed to him. He says, silence in the face of evil is itself evil. Not to speak is to speak. Not to act is to act, which is essentially, in a nutshell, that describes his point and his whole mission in life.
Yeah, he believed his faith should lead to action, right? It should not, and the faith should be visible. It shouldn't just be something you
Private.
do privately. Yeah, I mean, his famous saying that when I was really young when I read Cost of Discipleship. I was in my 20s. I think I had it for a philosophy class or an ethics class, but I only remember one line, which is, "When Christ calls a man, he bids him come and die." And it's great, you die to your ambitions, to your flesh, to your pride. So Bonhoeffer has so many messages, and of course it has the anti-Semitism message, which we never saw coming when we started this film in 2012. We saw it in Europe popping up, like in France, it was popping up. Never could we have imagined.
Yeah.
I mean,
what's going on in the campuses here today and all
Yeah.
that. I mean, it's just stunning, actually. I just can't believe it. I mean, these people seem to have no education at all. Anyhow.
Yeah, I mean, for us to see this in our country, we say, goodness, this is really God's timing, because it was not around when we were writing the film.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to ask you too, because you talked about that timeline, and you probably were thinking, gosh, like you were saying, it'll be a year, we'll have this done, right? We'll be ready to go. God had other plans, and this is coming out at a time, we're just over a year now since Hamas's horrific terror attack on Israel. The narratives, I mean, what you just mentioned, obviously I'm a New Yorker, you're New Yorkers, looking at the universities, these are places where young people are supposed to be learning everything about life, right? Learning common sense, not just academics, and none of that seems present in these protests that we're seeing. Do you think that this story can help illuminate that truth for maybe some people who are lost in this younger generation and being misled?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, first of all, we've lost the sense of discourse on our college campuses. We've lost the idea of different parties coming together, and I think
freedom of speech. Essentially.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at Bonhoeffer's life, he always wanted to know God's will. He always wanted to know, what is God's will in this situation. He was a very deep thinker. He actually was kind of raised in a church that was anti-Semitic. That's the Lutheran Church was, and yet he didn't stay there. He grew, and he began to look around for himself and see the truth. I think some of the kids on our campus, they don't read both sides. They don't, they just kind of go with what is everyone else saying. It's a real groupthink mentality. And Bonhoeffer's life became lonelier and lonelier as he sought the truth.
Yeah, unfortunately, also in universities, you've got the professors that are not helping matters either. And the leadership in the universities and the professors also need some education in this area as well.
It's so funny. I don't know. I'm a lot older probably than you, Bill. But when I went to college in the 70s, we used to pride ourselves on, I don't agree with you. You might be a communist, but I'll die for your right to say what you have to say. We're very far away from that.
Yeah, I mean, I have taught for the last 15 years at colleges, and the thing that shocks me the most is that young people, and I don't want to go too far off topic, but I think it's important to talk about because of what we're discussing here. Young people are afraid to share their opinion if it doesn't match the narrative of the professors and the students, and that's actually a very dangerous thing for everybody. A, for the people who can't speak or feel like they can't, and B, for the other students who aren't being challenged at all. And that's why I think we see this anti-Semitism creep up, because the professors and the students are not being challenged to think differently at all on any of this. At the end of the day, and I'll start with you, Emmanuel, on this. When you look at Bonhoeffer as a person and you look at the way that you've presented him in this film, what are some of the characteristics that you think really shine through? What's maybe the main characteristic of his life that for you say, wow, that is something we need to glean from him?
Well, I think, as I think mentioned previously, I mean, his total dedication to God and Christ and do the will of God. I mean, that's was always he prayed to make sure that he's always doing the will of God, and in so doing also to speak the truth and not be afraid. I mean, be, as we call it, Bonhoeffer brave. You gotta stand up and no matter what the cost. And it's about integrity, sacrificial love, and humility. I mean, essentially, that combination is that you've got to love others as Christ loved the world, and not be afraid. I mean, really, it's being Bonhoeffer brave, being brave and stand up for what is right, and how God leads you. So
yeah, that's one of our expressions, Bonhoeffer brave. And you know what you just described, Bill, is exactly where our young people are today, where Bonhoeffer was. It wasn't popular in those days to speak up for the Jews. I mean, on the contrary, you know. And so there's young people today are sort of in the same place that Bonhoeffer was. And I don't know if you'll see when you see the whole film or even the bits and pieces, you'll see that we chose a young actor. We chose a really wonderful actor. He's German. But we originally were casting it with 35-year-olds because we wanted gravitas, because he's such a deep thinker, and he dies at 39. But this young man had a lot of gravitas, and then we all thought, what a great choice, because now young people can relate to him. They have a hero. When he actually performed this, he was 27 years old. He's 28 today, but we want to inspire young people. That's one of the audience. That's one of the target audience is young people. You know, they're growing up in a really confusing world, really precarious world. They're going to need God, and they're going to need courage.
Absolutely. Now, if people want to grab tickets, they want to go see the film, where would you point them to go and do that?
And you can go to angelstudios.com/Bonhoeffer to buy tickets, and they're also being discounted at this point in time.
And a lot of my friends are just a lot of people we know around the country. You know, it's in the AMC theaters, it's in Regal. It's in Cinemark. It's a wide release, which we are so blessed to have. And so many people are just going to their local AMC theater, or you know.
Well, we have also friends that are so excited that they bought out the theater and invited all their friends. We have, in fact, my assistant has done that.
Yeah, actually, you know, it's a great movie to see with the Bible study group or your church group. And we are very much hoping people go back to theaters anyway, you know, to see good movie. It's good movies. It's wonderful to be in community and watch a film. I mean, I grew up that way, and I feel so sorry for these kids that are always watching it on their iPhones.
Yeah,
you know?
I know. That's the thing. Like, and I've talked to a lot of parents that have actually told me they've never taken their kid to a movie. You know, and it's so interesting. We go to the movies a couple times a year at least, if not more. But I thought, wow, you know, what an experience you lose out on to not be in that community there.
Yeah,
yes.
and
I mean, absolutely, as you said, you know, being in a community, being in a large theater with the sound and everything else, sound effects, it's really has a great impact. It's impactful.
Yeah.
Than looking at it on a screen on your home, on your computer, or your iPhone. This is exactly right.
And it's really good for anyone who's 12 and older. So it's great for families. You know, I'm on a board of a school, and they're actually taking the entire high school and middle school. You know, they're going 12 and up. So it's a good family picture, not for little children, but you know.
Yeah.
Well, I so appreciate you both joining me to talk about Bonhoeffer. Congratulations. Incredible story. Thank you for telling it.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for having us. Thank you very much.
It's been a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure.
That's all for today's Newsmakers podcast. Be sure to tune in for the next episode of the show, and also head over to the CBN News YouTube channel and the CBN News channel to watch Newsmakers every week. We'll see you soon.